Hey, what's up? It's another episode of Film Streak. My name is Rob. I know it's been a minute since I've recorded an episode talking about new films. And if you've been listening, maybe you just checked out some more recent episodes where I've been talking about stuff with the Houston Latino Film Festival and some of the filmmakers that were there, some of the people I got to talk to. Thanks for checking that out. Thanks for maybe sticking around to hear this episode and future episodes. But I've come back around trying to pick things back up and get back up to speed and catch up with some things. The first film I want to talk about is most notable for me and maybe for most people at this point because of all the other stuff going on around the film versus the actual film itself. And that is It Ends With Us. Now, this is a film that on its face, it's pretty standard kind of romantic drama, love story type of thing. But as you watch the film, and I think it's based on a novel or some other source material, but it is about some real domestic issues like domestic violence and abuse and that sort of thing. And that's kind of buried in the film. It's not like on its face. And so, it's curious that a film with that kind of at the heart of the subject matter, it has taken on its own life because of all the other controversy or whatever around it, which honestly, at this point, I don't really know if I understand it all. I just know that it's Blake Lively and her sort of feeling like some things were inappropriate or things were not done in a way that was either safe or accommodating for the cast from the filmmaker, writer, or no, he's not the writer, is he? Well, he's a director and the star, Justin Baldoni, who I don't know from anybody. But the film itself, I think it's really kind of a middle of the road type of thing. I feel like it doesn't really go as hard in some of the directions as I think it probably wanted to or seems like it should. Like, let's really address this issue of domestic violence and abuse within a relationship and how people deal with that kind of thing. That's like that's prime material to explore there. And the fact that this film, it does some of that, but it's also trying to play the kind of cute romantic drama aspects. It doesn't really land for me, I kind of watched it with a grain of salt of like, this is going to be so. But just because there's so much other stuff going on around it, I thought, well, maybe there's something here. What I'm taking away from it now, though, is that whether people like it or not, and whether they want to see a story about that sort of subject matter, it is kind of changing some perspectives or giving a little bit of a peek behind the scenes in terms of how films are made and what things are agreed to or permissible or consensual or whatever you want to say on a film set during a film production between writers, directors, actors, crew, cast, whatever. There's so many different dynamics at play. And if one person feels one way and someone else feels a different way, how big of a problem can that become? And with this film, at least, and with these people involved, it's become a massive problem. All I can say is, like, I saw this film a little while ago, probably earlier this year, and I just kind of didn't really know where to slot it in. Where else? What other films can I really line this up with? And this, I just finally wanted to get it out there and just kind of get it off of my list. Now, that's not the only thing. I also saw a very new release, very recent release in theaters called Drop. And this is curiously very adjacent. It's a very different type of film. It's kind of a romantic thriller, if that's a thing. I don't really know where exactly to position it either. The thing I do like about it is it does sort of take us on a very different sort of journey. We're following these two characters played by, was it Megan Fahey and Brendan Sklenar? Is that homeboy's name? Who, he was also in It Ends With Us. And I have to think, Is that coincidence? I don't know much about the guy and the other work that he's done. I think he's on one of the like Yellowstone shows or something. But I'll tell you this much: in It Ends with Us, he is kind of the white knight of the story, the good guy in the story, and it really conveys that. Actually, really sells that. At least to me. I mean, he's got a very there's some kind of something about his demeanor, his sort of presence that feels very much like a paragon. Like this is somebody you want to aspire to be or you admire in some way. And the roles that he's playing, I guess, at least in these two films, they're very similar. Like he's very earnest and very good-hearted. And look, I'm sure that's just hey, just pick the right roles and that'll put you in the right place. Some people get stuck playing bad guys. Some people get stuck playing good guys. And so in this film, in Drop, it's him and Megan Fahey, their characters. She's kind of a widowed single mom. She's going out on a date for the first time in years, and he is the date, but also they're getting to know each other, and it turns into this just one night of tension and suspense. And for what it is, right? It's sort of a very simple premise, but there's something about it, like the way it's assembled, like the way it's edited, and even some of the filmmaking involved. I feel like it's really leaning into some things that I feel like we've seen before in other ways. Maybe even, dare I even say, like Hitchcock territory. It takes place like almost in real time. It seems like there's a little bit of compression in some parts of the story, but a lot of this is really taking place over one evening as these two people are on this date in this restaurant, this, really luxurious high end place. And the mystery of knowing somebody is sort of digitally stalking her from afar, and yet kind of knowing who's in the restaurant, like who's within the vicinity, and trying to figure out who it is. That sort of thing plays out over time. The technological conceit here that cell phones are a part of this, and it's kind of what drives so much of the story and the plot and introduces all these new wrinkles. I feel like, in one way, it's sort of a gimmick, but the idea that, oh, yeah, you couldn't have told this story this way 10, 15, certainly not 20 years ago. Like, this is very much a contemporary take on that sort of like real-time suspense and putting the character in situations that it seems like there's no other way out, like there are no options. And so I like the simplicity of it, and I like the inventiveness of it. And there's a thing where you could watch a film, like an older film, let's say. I mean, you talk about 70s and 80s, of course, but even from 20 years ago, you could watch a film that's told in those times, and you would say, "Oh, well, if they just had cell phones, we don't have a story here. Like, there's no film." And in this one, it's kind of it's really the opposite. It's like this film really is driven by the use of the technology, and so it feels very modern. It feels very contemporary, and for what it is, it's a fun kind of evening watch, maybe something to actually watch on a date as you're watching these two people also kind of explore this anxiety or uncertainty of being on a date and getting to know somebody. And can you trust somebody? Can you take them at their word? Are they really who they say they are? Right? That whole thing of kind of being out in the world. And I think, look, this is probably too high minded for this particular film, but the idea of telling a story that is about people kind of reintroducing themselves into society, into culture. I mean, look, the last 5 years, everything that the world has gone through with people really withdrawing and being secluded or being isolated for a good part of those years for safety reasons or health reasons or whatever you want to call it. And the sense of like kind of reemerging and finding community again, or finding people again, or finding romance again. This film, I feel like it dances with a little bit of that. You know, it's holding hands with it at least. And of course, it is really a thriller, and it gets a little over the top at the end. But I think it kind of works for being such a simple premise. I was into it. Okay. So also in this film, it's got an element of this person dealing with past trauma and specifically domestic abuse. And it's just strange how these two films sort of kind of take different perspectives on a very similar, I don't know, life experience that some people go through and struggle with, and how people come out on the other side of that, right? And one is much more entertaining. One is maybe a little more emotional and thoughtful. Um, if it were me, I'd probably go with Drop. So those two films, I just thought, oh, it's weird that these both kind of line up together. And we've also got this element of the sort of budding romance, possibly in these two characters in both of these films. And I thought, okay, well, what else lines up with this? Like, there's got to be some other films. And I could talk about Anora, which I also saw. And, you know, that at this point now, as I'm recording this, that is now Best Picture winner. I mean, it really kind of swept most of the Oscars this year. And that is, of course, about Mikey Madison, her character of Anora, this stripper, exotic dancer, whatever. She kind of meets this young Russian kid. They kind of do this runaway weekend romance, and they get married, and then it turns into like a whole other thing where it seems like, oh, now her life is all of a sudden in danger. Like she's like stepped into like a really big problem. And what it actually is that no, it's just dealing with the dynamic of people that don't understand or just move differently, or they're a different culture and they don't want her, and yet she wants something, thinking it might be this, it might be this kid, it might be this sort of life, but she really just wants something else. And so this romance doesn't work in the end, but she does kind of see, just being removed from her situation, she sees like, oh, there's more to life now. That's my take on it. I think it's got some really kind of aspirational things in it. It's also funny. It's also kind of dark, but it never gets like to the place where like, oh, these are like Russian gangsters and now we're in a criminal underworld. It doesn't go there, even though you kind of feel like it's gonna go there. It really is about this character, this young woman, and her struggle with finding a path forward in life, and it not being what she was doing and it not being what she thought she was getting into. And, you know, I could say like the filmmaking is inventive and it feels energetic and it feels sort of, I don't know, refreshing in a way. I think Mikey Madison, in some ways, I feel like that performance, I think it's deceptively well done. And I say that because if you watch any interviews or if you've seen Mikey Madison in other films, maybe it's like, but that's not how she is. So it's clearly acting. She's really performing. Like that's not like the way she normally talks. That's not the way she normally moves or even like looks. So there's a lot going on there. There's a lot of work that's on screen. And it sells it. You do believe in this character. And so, okay, best actress, you got it. Do I really consider it maybe the best picture of last year? I don't know if I can go that far. I think it's got some really good elements and some good qualities and it's entertaining. But I don't know if I'd go that far with it, considering all the films that came out last year. So after that, I thought, all right, well, maybe this is a thing, right? This idea of these films about characters who are kind of in a romantic sense kind of coming together, but they're also butting heads, or they're finding themselves in this strange dynamic of being in danger, or just the future being uncertain, right? It's a real loose kind of thread to tie all this shit together. But here we go. The next film I saw was The Gorge, which is it's an Apple TV Plus film, an original film. It's science fiction slash horror, maybe. But it stars Miles Teller and Anya Taylor Joy, and you're just really dealing with these two characters and their sort of situation of being isolated and yet being like sort of within reach of each other, but not quite, right? And so that struggle of like, how do these two people who are so far apart find a way to connect? And once they do connect, what happens then? Now, the other interesting thing here is some of the filmmakers, some of the pedigree involved. You've got Scott Derrickson, was it like Sinister? And I think he did one of the, oh, he did the Doctor Strange movie, right? And he's done, I think he did like one of the Hellraiser movies, if I remember right. So he's done some work in this territory, and bringing that sort of vision, that sort of sensibility to a film like this, which is at its core, it is kind of a romantic drama between these two characters, but it gives it another layer. And you know, and then also you've got music by Trent Reznor and Atticus Ross. So like, wait, what? It's just such a strange kind of intersection of names and talents that I've kind of been following, or just have an interest in. And so ultimately with the film itself, I think it does some interesting things. I think once we find out, oh, what is actually in the gorge and how that starts to play out, I feel like it starts to get into territory that feels a little bit like we've seen this before. I like the sort of lead up to it, meeting these characters individually, seeing them take up their posts on both ends of this gorge independently. Like watching their stories kind of cut back and forth, I thought that was interesting. And even once they do kind of make contact with each other and how that is a relationship somehow, I thought, well, okay, I like this. And I almost would have wished like the film didn't even go to, oh, what is actually down in the gorge, right? But it does, and it's kind of what you might expect, but there is some other stuff in there, like some kind of deeper things that I think it's trying to comment on. Ultimately, I feel like the strength is in the leads and that romantic, or even just the actual dynamic between them, romantic or otherwise. There to me, I feel like there's chemistry there, and it works for the most part. That and the fact that both of these actors on their own could lead a film. And so the fact that they're kind of working and leading the film together in their own ways, it worked for me. You know, I had a good time watching it. So that brings me to the next film, which was, okay. So this one was another that it was about this idea of two characters coming together, but also being this sort of action, suspense, kind of romantic drama type of thing. And that is The Killer's Game. And so, you know, this wasn't a film that I was necessarily seeking out right away to check out, but when I saw the cast, I was like, okay, well, maybe there's something to it. It was Dave Bautista, Sophia Boutella, Ben Kingsley is in this, Pom Clementieff is in this, and who else? There's somebody else. Terry Crews. Scott Adkins is in this. So there was part of me that thought, all right, well, I'll give this a shot. I'll just see what it's about. And then to see the director here, J.J. Perry, who I think most people might not recognize at this point, but if you look at the credits, stunt coordinator for stuff like Avatar and John Wick and a lot of bigger kind of action films, I think you'll see where the influence kind of makes its way into this. Because it does start as a sort of a, I don't know, globe-trotting assassin, spy, thriller kind of thing. But then it takes a left turn and it goes into this story of the main character here, Dave Bautista. He plays this character named of Joe Flood. Hey, look, I can't speak to the characters' names, where those came from, but he's this assassin who is essentially kind of almost done. He's having like health issues, gets a diagnosis that he's got some sort of like terminal disease, right? While that's happening, he also meets this woman who sort of reinvigorates his, I don't know, his appreciation for life. The work that he does, it's kind of run its course. Ben Kingsley is like his mentor or counselor or whatever, and then tells him, like, hey, you gotta like put this behind you, or you gotta like get out in the world. You gotta find love. You gotta find something else. So he finds Sofia Boutella, and there's a little bit of like the sort of meet cute kind of situation, and they have a relationship and a romance and all that. And if I'm honest, it's not really, it doesn't really come off. But the idea that this, at least in the first, I don't know, 45 minutes of the film, I feel like this is a Dave Bautista I haven't really seen before. And because he's playing the action part, of course, he's playing the big bruiser part, but he's also playing this sort of weary, kind of burnt out, sort of defeated man in a way that the only thing I can think of that comes to mind, at least, is the character he played in Blade Runner 2049. He's the replicant who is, he's like a farmer or something, right? And he's kind of left a life behind of being the warrior or whatever. And so he's kind of just quiet and honestly kind of sad. And I think it's an interesting way to look at, I mean, just from his physical presence and his profiles, like this, how is this guy like down? But he somehow plays that. I feel like in this film, I feel like he can make that work versus when, oh, he finds this woman and he has this flourishing sort of relationship and now he's found happiness. That's where it starts to feel forced. I'm like, I don't know if I really buy this part of it. For me, Sofia Boutella, that's someone who, I mean, I think there's just every film I think I've seen her in, I can't not watch her. And it's something about her sort of energy, or she's a dancer normally or before being an actor. So even in this film, there's like a big dance number and she's a dancer in the film. And so that's an element. But there is sort of this, I don't know, grace or like litheness to her just in the role that, I don't know. It's just, it's really just interesting to watch. But yet these two characters together, I can't quite make the leap. And so once the film kind of goes in that direction, and then it becomes this really over the top, hard R rated, violent, brutal, graphic action film. And it's also kind of dancing with this weird sort of dark humor, man, it's a fine line to walk. And I feel like some moments here work, some moments don't. They just fall flat. Most people might recognize, or might be similar in tone at least, is something like Smoking Aces, right? Where you've got these characters kind of at the center, but then you've got these other assassins or hitmen or whatever that are basically coming at them. And it's also got this kind of weird, funky, just scrappy humor to it. And I attribute something like that to Joe Carnahan directly. Like that's sort of his style. That's like his personal style. I've talked to him. That is how he kind of gets down. And so I feel like it comes through in his work. I don't know about this director or the writer of this film and how that coalesces into this film, but I feel like it kind of is hit and miss, no pun, right? And so I don't know. I mean, maybe if you're a fan, and maybe if you just like these real kind of over the top R rated action films, but also that have like this comedic streak to it. This might be something to check out, but it's not quite like John Wick territory, even though some of the action is really intense and complicated and graphic. It's got this other sort of weird love story aspect to it. So I don't know. Maybe give it a shot. The next few films I want to talk about here are kind of interesting also in that The Amateur is a relatively new release, and this is a film that it's a little bit different in the sense that it's not about a romance. There's not like a kind of relationship at the center of it, but you do have a main character here who is kind of grieving the loss of his relationship, and that's where this thing really takes a turn, right? You've got Rami Malek who plays a sort of how is it, like a CIA or like a intelligence I don't know, analyst, or he works for the agency, but he's not an operative. He's not an agent necessarily. His wife is killed in a terrorist attack or like a hostage situation, and he's like, "Hey, I want to find out who did this, and I want to bring them to justice." Here's the thing: is like this film, it kind of it tips the hand a little too early. I feel like in knowing who the bad guys are. You know what I'm saying? Like, who are the guys behind the bad guys? It tells you that, I think, way too early. It's not that you couldn't have seen it coming, I guess, but I feel like it would have maybe made it a little more dramatically interesting to hold off on that. This character that Rami Malek plays, he decides, like, well, I'm going to go kill them. I'm going to get some training. I'm just going to go do it myself. I'm going to take care of these people. But Lawrence Fishburne is his sort of trainer, handler, mentor, whatever. And he kind of realizes, like, okay, well, I'm not someone who can be out in the field and work like those people do. I've got to use my brain. So he just takes a very different approach. He takes the approach of using technology, using a little bit of investigation and deduction and being a detective to find these people and to, of course, get justice for his wife's murder, but also to uncover like who the real bad guys are. And that's the thing that, like I said, if that would have come at the end of the film or later in the film, that would have been a bigger kind of moment or development. But the fact that we already kind of know who the bad guys are, it makes it a little bit anticlimactic when that gets resolved. So I think it's an interesting film. I think it's sort of the like anti Jason Bourne or anti James Bond in a way. It's like this guy is not an action hero, but he's smart and he can sort of play that three-dimensional chess. And so, I feel like, man, yeah, if I had to cast somebody like that, cast a character like that, Rami Malek, that's like perfect. He's got this sort of doe-eyedness or this there's something that about him that seems a little bit like green or unsure, and I mean the fact that he played maybe a very similar or adjacent character in Mr. Robot, I mean I could see that. It's like, oh, this lines up perfectly. So overall I feel like it was kind of middle of the road. I don't know if I'd necessarily want to sit through it again. I think it's trying to do a couple of different things, I guess, for the genre. Maybe show us a little bit of a different spin on it all. But I think if you're really looking for something that kind of gradually evolves into more action, it doesn't really get there. It really is more of a head game that this character is playing. And so the last two films I want to talk about here, it's strange because these films both have the same title, but they're very different films. And one of them is a remake, and one of them is an adaptation of a graphic novel, and that is The Killer and The Killer. Now, one of them is directed by David Fincher, one is directed by John Woo. And guess which is the remake? I talked about this a while back, that somebody was going to remake The Killer, and the fact that it was John Woo, I thought, all right, well, I don't know why he would do it. I didn't really understand the sort of motivation or the reason for it. And seeing this film, man, I still don't understand. I get the sense of sort of updating the story and the characters and the dynamic between the characters in the film. But I just here's what I'll say about it is that for whatever John Woo brought to, let's say, action cinema in what was that, like the late 80s and 90s, for whatever he did with those films, even to some American films, of course, he did the one Mission Impossible, he did Face Off, right? Which I think still kind of holds up, and it's got some cheesiness or whatever to it, but I think for what it is, it's a definite 90s film. Or you've got something like what was the one he did with Jean Claude Van Damme? Hard Target? Is that what it was called? And here's another one he did with John Travolta. Oh man, Broken Arrow. Right, like there was a little bit of a run there with some American films where you thought, okay, now we're going to see John Woo bring it here. But aside from those, I really feel like it just hasn't been the same kind of output. Like the level of quality just hasn't been there. And this one, I mean, especially, it just feels like one. It feels like why? Why did we do this? I don't get the reason for it. And also, I think something about, maybe it's just times have changed, or maybe John Woo, like his sort of sensibilities have changed. His vision has changed, maybe, like, cinematic vision. But this, I kind of felt this way with Silent Night. I think it was last year or the year before. It just feels like not really there. Like I see little moments where I'm like, oh yeah, this looks like a John Woo film, but there's enough outside of those little moments where I'm like, this just looks like I don't know, it doesn't seem cohesive. It just seems like a lot of things kind of slapped together. And for as much action that is that he's sort of known for, the fact that this film really feels like it's kind of light on action and like heavy on talking, uh, I don't know what to think of that, to be honest. There's a big kind of showdown at the end of the film, and it's like, oh, when the doves come out, I'm like, come on, man. At this point, John Woo or somebody next to him or something, you've got to know, like, that has become a joke now. Like, that's not a thing to do now. Natalie Emmanuel, who plays the main character here, right? She kind of takes over from, well, I don't know, because this really is not like just a straight remake of the original. It is kind of a reimagining in a way. And so you've got this sort of different dynamic between the main characters. But Natalie Emmanuel, it's like there is a sort of presence to her, right? I think that was obvious even from Game of Thrones. I mean, she's got like a stillness, like a stoicism, I guess. Is that the way to say it? But she's also got this sort of grace and this fluidity to how she moves, especially with the action stuff. But it's like when it comes to like real like drama, like really showing me a character, I don't really feel it, you know? And so it's like for the action stuff, she's great. And we saw that even in, what was it, the Fast and the Furious movies or whatever. But this one, I was like, you, we just got to see a little more to understand why this character is doing what she's doing. And I don't really get it. Other than she just looks badass, I don't, I wasn't really down for it. So I don't know. Call it a disappointment, I guess, for John Woo. I really want to see him still kind of give us the level of films and the sort of chaos and inventiveness and the danger of the films that he'd done many years ago. But, look, things change and it doesn't really work out, So the last film I want to talk about here is also called The Killer, of course, but this is directed by David Fincher, and this is adapted from a graphic novel that is a very different kind of story. And this is about a man who is an assassin, played by Michael Fassbender, and he is kind of a very solitary, very disciplined, almost monastic sort of operator. And doesn't really sort of entertain the graces, the social graces of other people and society, even to the point where it's like, as we kind of see him go about his thing and do his job, let's say, it just feels like, oh, this man does not understand what it's like to live with people. And part of that, I think, is David Fincher. That's his approach to storytelling. That's the sort of stories he, I think, is fascinated by, it seems. And yet there is, even though this is David Fincher, and I feel like you know what to expect visually and cinematically and thematically, this film does do a couple of different things as it progresses, because we see this man like kind of botch a job, and we see the repercussions and how he has to sort of find his way out of this, because now the walls start closing in because he's the killer. But, well, if the killer doesn't do his job, we got to take care of the killer. And so now he's trying to tie up loose ends, trying to stay on the run, stay in the shadows. And I think that's really fascinating, because Michael Fassbender really embodies that sort of like calculated, sort of just very regimented, and even in his narration, in the way he speaks and moves, he feels very calm and very calculated. But there is a point in the film where that changes. And we do see, like, I mean, look, if you watch David Fincher films, if you are familiar enough, you know, he moves the camera only certain ways, and he only moves the camera for certain reasons. But there is a point in this film where things really do get switched up. Like, it goes handheld, it goes kind of loose, and colors change, and pacing changes. And so it gives me a sense like it's for a reason. It's not, oh, just this is just how we decided to do it. It's because the energy around the character is becoming anxious. It's becoming nervous. And so I think that's a really interesting development for a David Fincher film, at least, or the one that comes to mind. You know, that was the thing that really stuck out to me. It was like, oh, there's a little something different here this time. And I like seeing something like that, because on one hand, I like knowing David Fincher. I know what I'm going to get in a sense. But this, to kind of still surprise in a way, that's always good to know that there might be something else here that I wasn't ready for. So, you know, what I say, this is like David Fincher is one of his better films. I don't know about that. I mean, I think I still hold some of his much earlier films way higher in way higher regard. But I think this at least shows us like, well, he still got the certain eye or sense of the characters and stories that he likes to tell, that he's always been fascinated with. It's still there. So, let's see. That's a run of films. Now, some of these are much more violent and more aggressive and more graphic than others. But ultimately, I think there is something about them that is all about the sort of dangers or the pitfalls of being in either like a relationship or like an arrangement that you may not be able to find your way out of. Put it that way. Is that a way to tie it together? I don't know. Maybe. So anyway, that's it for this episode. I just wanted to talk about some of these, kind of get back into the mix, get some new films down on the list. And hey, thanks for checking this out. Thanks for sticking around for a minute. And if you want to hear some other episodes, you go to filmstreak.com. You can subscribe on Spotify and Apple Podcasts, YouTube. These are still audio only. Or you can sign up at filmstreak.com. You can sign up there to get them by email. It just comes straight to you. You don't got to do all the podcast thing. Also there, I have the list for all of these films. We're up to, let's see, at one point I thought we were up to 650, but not quite. We're getting there. We're in the let me see, where's the count here? 630s, somewhere in there. So anyway, that's kind of the latest. Oh, also, with the Houston Latino Film Festival, the last couple episodes, I featured some interviews. Now, those were kind of trimmed for time. I didn't want to really try and drag it on too much, but The full interviews, or like extended editions or whatever, the longer form interviews are available or will be available on the Houston Latino Film Festival YouTube page, where we actually sat and recorded those on camera. And so those will be there. And so you can go there, check those out. I'll put a link in the show notes here so you can go see what those are about. Anyway, that's it for me for now. I'm going to go hang out. You too, you know what it is. You do your thing. Go watch something.